Hi, I'm Cynthia Corsetti, Executive Coach and Career Transition Expert. Welcome to the Job Search Bootcamp. If you haven't watched the earlier modules and videos, I do encourage you to jump back and do that now. It's only going to help you and it's going to make all of this make more sense. So in my career, I've interviewed thousands of people. And I also train professionals on how to interview candidates. So I sit on both sides of the table. And honestly, I have done this for years. In this video, I'm going to tell you about a trap that so many people fall into when interviewing. And it's a trap on both sides of the table. But after you watch this video, you're going to be ready for anything. As always, if you find value in what I'm offering here, I invite you to subscribe to the channel and follow me on LinkedIn and Instagram. Now, let's go find out that secret trap. Hey, how are you? According to an article in the Harvard Business Review, the CEO of Allied Signal described the interview as the most flawed process in American business. And based on my 15 years of interviewing experience and in training interviewers, I couldn't agree more. So today, I'm going to teach you a couple of tricks to get around the flaws. Okay, well, at least one major one. Specifically today, we'll cover 1, the small talk trap, and 2, the art of the pivot. By the time you finish watching this video, you'll know exactly what the small talk trap is, why it happens, and you'll have an exact tool, the pivot, that will be your go-to when you want to avoid falling into that trap. So let's get to it. An interview is a trusty little tool. If done correctly, it gives the employer a ton of valuable information on you, the candidate. The employer will learn if you have the required knowledge, skills, and abilities to do the job, that you can hit the ground running and have little ramp-up time. They'll learn if you're a good fit for the culture and if you're a good investment. In other words, you're not going to quit in a few months and chase the next shiny object. All of this is important for the employer to know. When an interview begins, everyone is trying to build rapport. The employer wants you to feel as comfortable as possible, and you want to connect. The most logical and common way for this rapport building is through small talk. It breaks the ice. You talk about the traffic, comment on the weather. It's all good and necessary and probably can make you feel a lot more comfortable. In fact, many interviews start off with these types of icebreakers. But the problem comes if this small talk pulls the conversation away from you and your ability to do the job for more than a few seconds. That's the small talk trap. In fact, it can cost you the job. Let me give you an example. On one occasion recently, I sat in on an interview of one of my VP level clients, David. He was conducting the interview. As David reviewed the resume of the candidate, he noticed that the candidate had worked with an acquaintance of his named Joe. This started a conversation about this person named Joe. They both knew Joe. It turned out that they both liked Joe. David had shared family vacations with Joe, and the candidate had coached soccer with Joe. Joe was great. Joe was a fun guy. Joe liked to fish. The two of them talked about Joe, and I literally timed this for 22 minutes. Yes, 22 minutes of a 45-minute interview were spent talking about Joe. This candidate, while feeling comfortable and friendly, he lost valuable interview time. And at the end of the interview, the only thing David could tell me about this candidate was that he knew Joe. He had absolutely no idea if this candidate had the knowledge, the skills, and the abilities to do the job. He didn't know if he could hit the ground running with little ramp-up time. He had no idea if he'd fit the culture or be a good investment. But another candidate who didn't know Joe, that candidate was remembered for his amazing skills and talents. And that candidate got the job. That's the small talk trap. And it's a perfect segue into the second part of this lesson, the art of the pivot. What's a pivot? Well, it's the way you answer a question that pulls the conversation away from small talk and back to why you're the best candidate for the job. Let's say you're the candidate who knows Joe. You're feeling pretty good when you figure out that you have this connection with your interviewer. You have something in common. You're starting to actually relax a little and have a little fun on the interview. But don't allow yourself to fall into the trap. When the interviewer asks you if you know Joe, answer politely, yes. If the conversation moves off Joe, it's all cool. There's no need to pivot. But what happens if he keeps talking about Joe? If he shares a quick story with you and asks when you've seen him last? Simply answer factually with when you saw him last, but then pivot. And you share a story that relates to your qualifications as a candidate, but you keep Joe in mind. So if you worked on a specific project with Joe, you talk about the project and the results that you got and how great it was for you to do it with Joe. If you never really worked on something with him, bring up a quality that Joe has that you respect and pivot that into how you're a good candidate. It might look something like this. Yes, Joe, he is the most organized individual that I have ever met. In fact, it was Joe's organizational talent that inspired me to create my own time management system. And I've had the privilege of sharing that system throughout my entire organization. And it all goes back to Joe. See that? You got something in about you, and you still had really great rapport with the connection of Joe. The pivot requires some preparation. It means you have to know some stories and examples of things that you're proud of that you can bring into small talk. But it's worth the effort that you put in ahead of the interview. Because, as we mentioned earlier, the interview has been considered to be the most flawed process in American business. And you can offset one of those flaws with your preparation. Each step of preparation will make you feel more confident, and confidence is key in an interview. Let's wrap up this video by reviewing what we've covered. We learned to identify the small talk trap and how to use the pivot to avoid it. You're on your way. In our next video, we're going to break down the pieces of the interview. You'll learn what to expect and what the questions will be like. There's so much to cover, and I'm glad you're here. See you in the next video.